Welcome back to another Questions for the Rector Live. I'm Stephen Heiner, and with us today to comment on the SSPX Excommunications is His Excellency Bishop Donald Sanborn. Hello, Your Excellency.
Hello.
So something that I had neglected to mention last time, but I should now. A lot of people had thought that Father Disposito was going to have open heart surgery on July 1st, and he was. But unfortunately, he didn't have surgery because there was a scheduling change. So he's going to have surgery on Monday. Is that right, Your Excellency?
Correct.
So we would just ask you to keep him in your prayers for successful surgery and recovery. The second note, a lot of commenters asked, Your Excellency, what was read in place of the apostolic mandate at your episcopal consecration?
Well, that's almost to the day, well, a few days, 24 years ago. So that, I'm a little rusty as to what I said. But I got up in the pulpit and said it myself before the ceremony. It was not during the ceremony. And I said that the consecration is justified because of the heresy that is reigning in the institutions of the Catholic Church since Vatican II, and that we have to preserve the true episcopacy and true ordinations, valid episcopacy, valid ordinations, and that's the justification for it. And that if ever there should be a pope who repudiates Vatican II and all of its evil changes and is an anti-modernist, that I would be the first one to submit to him.
And yesterday, or not yesterday, this was 2 days ago when you did the last live stream after the SSPX had done the consecrations. If you'd like to see that, you can find that on the channel. His Excellency did a 30-minute commentary on the day of the consecrations. One of the positives His Excellency had mentioned was that he was happy to see 4 bishops that would have the Catholic faith that were being consecrated, and that was at least something positive. And people were very scandalized, and I think potentially new viewers who'd never seen you before, Your Excellency, they said, how can he say such a thing? It's very rare for a bishop who's being consecrated to have the Catholic faith.
Well, I was thinking about Novus Ordo bishops. They don't have the Catholic faith because they accept Vatican II. Vatican II is heresy. And all of the subsequent reforms are in line with those heresies. All liturgical and other disciplinary reforms are in line. The new Code of Canon Law contains sacrilege. So that's what I'm referring to, that the bulk of episcopal consecrations, quote unquote, are of heretics. And that's our stance. If it isn't heresy, we should embrace the Novus Ordo. We should just submit to the local hierarchy. So these are 4 bishops who have the Catholic faith. I mean, despite certain, let's say, errors that they adhere to, those errors do not affect their Catholic faith. So I'm happy to see 4 valid bishops, because Novus Ordo bishops are not validly consecrated. Valid bishops who profess the Catholic faith. That's very unusual. They're rare birds. So that's what it means.
So some people might protest, Your Excellency. Why would you say that the SSPX bishops are Catholic bishops?
Well, they profess the Catholic faith. I think they are misled with regard to how they're reacting to Vatican II, mistaken, let's say, but that doesn't affect their adherence to Catholic dogma. See, they profess Catholic dogma, they adhere to it. I would not accuse them of being heretics or anything like that. I mean, no, they are Catholics. I would say just that they are misled with regard to their reaction to Vatican II.
So in the description of the video, you will see links to various documents from 1988 and 2026, which are there for people to reference. And His Excellency had a chance to read them and review them before today's episode. I'm going to read from the 1988 decree, Your Excellency. That came out the day after, same sort of speed that we saw from the Vatican this time. Dated July the 1st, 1988, Monsignor Marcel Lefebvre, Archbishop, Bishop Emeritus of Toul, notwithstanding the formal canonical warning of June 17 last and the repeated appeals to desist from his intention, has performed a schismatical act by the episcopal consecration of 4 priests without pontifical mandate and contrary to the will of the Supreme Pontiff, and has therefore incurred the penalty envisaged by Canon 1364, Section 1, and Canon 1382 of the Code of Canon Law. Having taken account of all the juridical effects, I declare that the above-mentioned Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre and Bernard Fillet, Bernard Tissier de Malaret, Richard Williamson, and Alfonso de Galarreta have incurred ipso facto excommunication, lete sententiae, reserved to the Apostolic See. Moreover, I declare that Archbishop Antonio de Castromayor, Bishop Emeritus of Campos, since he took part directly in the liturgical celebration as co-consecrator and adhered publicly to the schismatical act, has incurred excommunication lete sententiae as envisaged by Canon 1364, Section 1. The priests and faithful are warned not to support the schism of Archbishop Lefebvre, otherwise they shall incur ipso facto the very grave penalty of excommunication. From the Office of the Congregation of Bishops, July 1st, 1988, Cardinal Bernard Gantin. Will you well remember that decree, Your Excellency?
Yes, I mean, I was not associated, obviously, with them, but I do remember the whole incident, yes.
It seems history has repeated itself?
Well, I would say no, because this excommunication is far more thorough than the 1988 one. See, the people are urged not to partake in their masses. You see, that's 1988. Here, if you do on a regular basis, you too are schismatic. That's very different from what took place. Also, they excommunicated all the priests. So the bishops and the priests are all excommunicated. They have also added these ways in which you are reconciled with the Novus Ordo, which is the same way in which you would be reconciled as if you were a Lutheran or a Presbyterian. Because they have gone so far as to make absolutely this SSPX a non-Catholic sect, just like the Lutherans, the Episcopalians, or anybody else. That goes far beyond 1988. They didn't do that. So this is Leo the 14th is treating the SSPX the way Leo the 10th treated Martin Luther. Exactly. See, and what is significant to me is that this is an excommunication of Roman Catholicism, because the reason why SSPX did not get their approval to be something, incorporated into the Novus Ordo is because they refused Vatican II. If they had asked for simply the same kind of status as the Fraternity of St. Peter or other types of institutions like that, they would have gotten it, because I think the Vatican would have been very anxious to avoid this debacle. They would have gotten it if they say, we're okay with Vatican II, but we just want, a place to have the traditional mass and so forth. They would have gotten it. But this is an excommunication of those who reject Vatican II. Vatican II is the Magna Carta, the constitution of the new religion. And we can see now that this act puts to death the claim that the Vatican II is merely a pastoral council and we don't have to accept it. If you don't accept it, you get excommunicated. You are outside the church. That means it is obligatory. So that's very significant in this excommunication. So what they are doing is saying the Roman Catholicism before Vatican II is alien to the new religion. So actually, in my opinion, the mud comes back on the face of the Novus Ordo more than on SSPX. In other words, SSPX is in the perfect position right now to attack Vatican II as heretical, and that this is the motive of our excommunication. This is why you're calling us a sect. And in fact, you are the sect. You modernists inhabiting the Vatican, you are the sect. We are the Catholics. That's what they should say. The whole world is listening to them. The entire world. That's what they should do. But they won't.
Unfortunately, yes. You noted that before, Your Excellency, and some of my work colleagues had asked about this, because it's all over the mainstream news, because it's a big deal to get excommunicated by the Catholic Church as this ancient ritual. So when people hear it, they're somewhat fascinated.
It's in the New York Times today.
Yes. So as you say, it would be a great time to fire a broadside, but
Absolutely.
instead there's a discussion of the good of souls and other things like that
We're
aren't
loyal
the real issue.
to Leo and all of this nonsense that he said in his speech, Father Pagliarani. I mean, they're still on that fantasy world and living in the fantasy world that somehow they're connected to this Novus Ordo debacle and this monster, and they should just respond with. They should, in a sense, excommunicate the modernists. In other words, you are the ones. We have 2,000 years of tradition with us. You are the innovators. You are the Lutherans. You are the ones that should be excommunicated. That's what they should say.
Well, there was a kind of response that way, Your Excellency, going back again to 1988. This was a letter written from Icon on July the 6th. Again, this is linked in the description of the video. Your Eminence, gathered around our Superior General, the superiors of the districts, seminaries, and autonomous houses of the Priestly Society of St. Pius X, we thought it good to respectfully express to you the following reflections. You thought it good by your letter of July 1st to inform their excellencies Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, Bishop Antonio de Castro-Mayor, and the 4 bishops whom they consecrated on June the 30th at Icon of the excommunication Latae Sententiae.
Latae Sententiae.
Latae Sententiae.
Yes.
We let you judge for yourself the value of such a declaration, coming from an authority who, in its exercise, breaks with all its predecessors down to Pope Pius XII in worship, teaching, and government of the Church. As for us, we are in full communion with all the popes and bishops before the Second Vatican Council, celebrating precisely the Mass which they codified and celebrated, teaching the catechism which they drew up, standing up against the errors which they have many times condemned in their encyclicals and pastoral letters. We let you judge on which side the rupture is to be found. We are extremely saddened by the blindness of spirit and the hardening of heart of the Roman authorities. On the other hand, we have never wished to belong to this system which calls itself the Conciliar Church and defines itself with the Novus Ordo Missae, an ecumenism which leads to indifferentism and the laicization of all society. Yes, we have no part, nullam partem habemus, with the pantheon of the religions of Assisi. Our own excommunication by a decree of your eminence or of another Roman congregation would only be the irrefutable proof of this. We ask for nothing better than to be declared out of communion with this adulterous spirit which has been blowing in the church for the last 25 years. We ask for nothing better than to be declared outside of this impious communion of the ungodly. We believe in the one God, our Lord Jesus Christ, with the Father and the Holy Ghost, and we will always remain faithful to his unique spouse, the one holy Catholic, Apostolic, and Roman Church. To be publicly associated with this sanction, which is inflicted upon the 6 Catholic bishops, defenders of the faith and its integrity and wholeness, would be for us a mark of honor and a sign of orthodoxy before the faithful. They have indeed a strict right to know that the priests who serve them are not in communion with a counterfeit church, promoting evolution, Pentecostalism, and syncretism. In union with these faithful, we make ours the words of the prophet, "Open your hearts to the Lord and serve him only, and he will free you from the hands of your enemies. With all your heart return to him and take away from your midst any strange gods. Confident in the protection of her who has crushed all the heresies in the world, we assure your eminence of our dedication to him, who is the only way of salvation." And Your Excellency, it was signed by every single district superior of the Society of St. Pius X at the time.
Yes, I saw that. Unfortunately, that didn't last. I mean, shortly after the death of Archbishop Lefebvre, they started up again trying to marry the Novus Ordo, trying to be accepted by the Novus Ordo. All of that, and that was an excellent letter. I agree with every single thing that they said. But that spirit did not endure in the SSPX. And since 1995, perhaps, they have been constantly kissing up to the Novus Ordo in the hope of being accepted until finally they were not accepted. And if they had continued on that path and had attacked Vatican II and attacked the Novus Ordo hierarchy and said they are not true popes, not true bishops, etc., they would have completely justified what happened on July 1st, totally justified that. But they have been saying, we're one with you, we're una cum, all of these heretics, and a lot of good it did them. That didn't help at all. And so now they are in this position. And even then, even in this situation, they don't come out with something like that. They come out with, well, we are loyal to you, Holy Father, and we are doing this for the salvation of souls, and all of this mealy-mouthed whatever theology, if you want, that really doesn't hold any water. You can't consecrate bishops on your own because you want to save souls. That's the saving of souls is the work of the Roman pontiff, and he has the right to determine all what the hierarchy is and what the hierarchy does. And a bishop is, even a bishop without jurisdiction, is part of the Catholic hierarchy. See, so that's why it's a schismatic act, because a bishop, by his very nature, even without jurisdiction, is part of the Catholic hierarchy. They all appear in a book called the Annuario Pontificio, which is published every year by the Vatican, the whole list of who is a bishop and cardinal, etc. And that's the Catholic hierarchy. So, I mean, on paper, the Vatican is 1,000% justified in everything it says if you regard those people as true authority. You cannot argue with it. It's all in line with all Catholic theology. And the SSPX still goes on saying, you're the Pope, you're the local bishops, et cetera, and we're just trying to save souls. I mean, that is an absurd justification. And the Vatican probably looks at them and just laughs.
Well, as you say, Your Excellency, the only possible justification would be the absence of the Roman pontiff and the use of Epikeia.
Correct.
Now, you said that you agreed, and I saw a lot of Bishop Sanborn type expressions in that letter I read, but there was something that I thought you would take issue with, which was this phrase, the conciliar church. We don't wish to belong to the system which calls itself the conciliar church. Well, firstly, the Novus Ordo doesn't call itself the conciliar church.
It did. Yes, it did.
Oh, it did, Your Excellency.
That was the bishop. It was one of the bishops in Italy that called it the conciliar church.
Okay.
Yes. I remember that at the time.
I'm corrected.
So I remember everything because I've been around forever. But that was commonly used in the 1980s.
But you don't like using this term, conciliar church.
No, it can be understood in a proper sense. In other words, the quote unquote church that has emerged from Vatican II, in the sense that the state of the church emerging from Vatican II, it can be understood well in that sense. But no, I would reject the idea of a separate church from the Roman Catholic Church, because precisely they have not done that. They were very careful not to separate themselves. And that's why it has been so successful, because they are all wearing the badges and insignia of the Roman Catholic Church when they're spreading their heresies. That's why they have been so successful. If they had said, oh, we're leaving the Catholic Church, we're founding the conciliar church, everyone would have just said, well, good luck, and just don't bother. It's like the Lutheran Church or the Presbyterians or the Anglicans. But that's the key, is that they preserve the institution, the Empire State Building filled with vermin and cockroaches and everything else. The building is there, but it is filled with heretics, and so that's that. And I just put maybe a different interpretation. I don't think they see it as a separate church. I don't think they do.
I mean, that sort of phrasing is very common among their people, Your Excellency, conciliar church.
Yeah, I say the new religion.
And why are you insistent on using the term Novus Ordo religion or new religion?
Precisely because they did not break. They did not break from the institution. The modernists, they rose very gradually from the time of St. Pius X, after his death, rose very gradually in the institution and changed it from within. This was the goal of the modernists, to remain inside and change the church from within. It's in their literature. I've read it. So that was the master stroke of Satan. It's like hijacking a plane, you might say.
For those who are interested in hearing more and you're new to this channel, if you navigate to the video section, you'll see a recent Questions for the Rector where His Excellency addressed quotes from modernists who professed that they would stay within the church and try to change the church from within.
Yes.
So if you could check that out on the videos tab if you'd like. For those of you who haven't already done so, please remember to hit the like button, and you can see from others if you want to tell us where you're watching or listening from. That may be helpful to everyone. So, Your Excellency, that's part of what I think a lot of people who are tuning in, maybe seeing you for the first time or hearing these arguments for the first time, the distinction, and it's very important in Catholicism to make distinctions that you're making between church and religion, underscores how this was able to be carried out. That
Yes.
the Vatican II created a new religion which looks like it's housed under the auspices of the Catholic Church. They didn't create a new church.
Correct. That's the problem.
So you had said that the excommunication this time was much harsher.
Yes.
And more thorough. And the text that's substantially different here, you will see a lot of what we saw in 1988, some of the same canons. The final sentence this time, this is from July the 2nd, 2026, Victor Fernandez, Cardinal Fernandez, who is known by His Excellency as Tacho Fernandez.
Fernandez, yeah.
It says, clerics and lay faithful are warned not to adhere to the schism of the Society of St. Pius X, as they would thereby incur ipso facto the penalty of latae sententiae excommunication.
Yes, again, they are treating it as if it were the Lutheran Church. See that it's a schismatic sect, and if you frequent that, that would be true of any non-Catholic sect. If you frequent that on a regular basis, you would be presumed to legally to adhere to it, and you would fall under the same excommunication. Let me point out this as well. Leo is constantly bellyaching about the death penalty. Do you ever notice that? Oh, yeah. The death penalty. It's worse than abortion. He has pronounced the death penalty on the SSPX. Because excommunication, if you do not repent of excommunication, you go to hell. You are outside the church. If you are outside the church, you have no hope of salvation. And so he has pronounced a death penalty upon them, far worse than a physical death penalty. So he's a big hypocrite as far as I'm concerned. They're all ecumenical and nice and cozy, with women archbishops and all of this nonsense, and where she's giving blessings, this thing from Canterbury, but when it comes to the Catholic faith, and I think that's the honor, you might say, of the SSPX. They have been excommunicated for adhering to the Catholic faith. They refuse Vatican II. Vatican II is the destroyer of the Catholic faith. They refuse it, and they got excommunicated for that. That's good, but they should capitalize on that and attack. I hope they do. I hope they're listening. Attack the Vatican II and all of its effects. They're in the perfect position to do it.
Well, as before, Your Excellency, you're going to see people saying legal objections. The excommunication for attending was in the explanatory note, not the punitive text.
Oh,
so
that's
because it wasn't on.
It's poppycock.
I was going to say the T wasn't crossed, and it was on Tuesday, not on Wednesday.
Yes, no, that's the Pope is not bound by any kind of form or legal forms or anything like that. All of that document is from Leo, and if he's the Pope, it is all valid, and he could take canon law and throw it in the trash if he wants. If he's the Roman Pontiff, throw it in the trash and write a new one by himself. That's his power. He is not bound. They did the same thing in 1988. They did the same thing with the new Mass. Oh, well, there was the Paul VI didn't really do the form right with regard to the promulgation. Therefore, it was never suppressed. It's all just poppycock and horse feathers. The Pope is not bound by any of that. If he says you're outside the church, you are outside the church, period. He's the supreme judge of all Catholics, if he is the Pope. We say he isn't. But if you regard him as the Pope, you cannot argue with him.
That's the position, Your Excellency. They are saying that he is the Supreme Pontiff, but they don't really have to obey him.
Right. They act as if he doesn't exist. I always say they're in the practical order Sedevacantists, because they act as if he doesn't exist, and actions speak louder than words, as the old saying goes. They don't think he's the Pope.
Well, and Sedevacantists are the worst things ever, Your Excellency. As he often notes, there's a scene in Ben-Hur in which the soldier goes down and he sees lepers. And His Excellency has said it's the same voice that you'd have, Sedevacantists.
Yes.
So
and they all walk out of the room immediately, and close the door, and awful.
It's the worst thing you could be.
Yes.
We have a super chat from Giselle Demers for 50 Canadian dollars. Thank you, Giselle. If you have a question, put it in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer that. There's a question here, just a question about validity, Your Excellency. Again, these watchers and listeners who are unfamiliar with you, who don't know these things, are curious. How can Rome make the confessions of the SSPX invalid? They have valid orders. Is it possible in ordinary times for Rome to be able to make confessions by a valid minister invalid? How?
Yes, because the power of loosing and binding in confession, it belongs to the Roman pontiff, and he can give it or take it away as he pleases. Francis, for example, let them have it. You see, so their confessions are valid. I think even Pius XI gave that jurisdiction, what we call sacramental jurisdiction, to the Orthodox. If I'm not mistaken, he did, so that those people, despite their errors and all, could at least be absolved validly. So he can control that. So the local bishop, for example, can suspend you. That means you cannot hear confessions validly. So that's perfectly in order with regard to Catholic theology. The same thing is true about marriages. You see, the priest is the official representative of the church. The two spouses are the ministers of the sacrament, and the priest is only there as an official witness. So they can take that away too. You can't be an official witness. You see, so it's juridical. So they're perfectly within their bounds if he is the Pope. See, so. But we say, of course, he is not the Pope. The see is vacant, and at least formally, and so therefore, it doesn't matter. You see, so so they have valid orders, but they can be restricted according to, for example, what you usually only had validity to hear confessions in your diocese. And if you went to another diocese, you would have to call up the chancery and say, can I have power to forgive sins? Can I have sacramental jurisdiction? That was true well before the council. That was always true. See, so it's restricted. Even before, in earlier times, you were restricted to people of your own parish, and it would be invalid in other places. So that's entirely correct. They can do that, see, if they are the true authority.
And expanding on that, Your Excellency, a priest can be given permission to give confirmation by, I think, obviously by the Holy Father, but by his local ordinary as well. Is that correct?
No. Pius XII said it has to be an indult from the Vatican, and if you don't get the indult from the Vatican, it's invalid. Okay, he's very clear about that.
But there's an example of the validity of the sacrament being extended from the Holy See.
Yes, the Holy See has power over all the sacraments. Now, it doesn't have the essential power of the priest is to consecrate the bread and wine into the body and blood of Christ. That can never be taken from him. See, but some other sacraments are subject to the jurisdiction of the Pope.
From Logan Mislock for $10. Thank you, Logan. Would it be better to be a full-blown sede than to believe that Prevost is the real Pope and disobey him? It's so obvious that these men in the Vatican aren't real Catholics and are imposters.
Well, full-blown sede, I don't know what you mean by full-blown, but if you're saying that they are non-Catholics, that they are heretics, and if you are saying that they have promulgated heresy since Vatican II, and that Vatican II is itself heretical, all of those things I would say, then you must say that they are not true Roman pontiffs, true bishops of dioceses, because otherwise you would have to conclude that the church has defected. And to say that the church has defected is a heresy. So the very faith itself requires you to say that these men are not true Roman pontiffs. See, it's not a question of whether I think so or anything. It's a question of faith.
Have this sort of double thinking here, Your Excellency. Vatican II was a dumpster fire. The Vatican being prideful and refusing to admit it is so sad. God bless the SSPX. What a pity the Holy Father is punishing them for practicing true Catholicism.
Well, again, I would call that person confused, because if he is the Holy Father, then he is completely in his right. You can't have your Pope and eat him too. You can't say he's the Pope and ignore him and revile him, thumb your nose at him, and just say, we don't pay attention to your punishing because you're wrong. You can't, if he is the Pope, he is entirely 1000% in his right to do this. So yes, Vatican II is a dumpster fire. The Novus Ordo is a sinking religion, particularly in Europe and in North America. And in other parts of the world, yes, there's a lot of people that are baptized, and that's how they count them, but only about 5% go to Mass on Sunday. And in this country, there's a lot of baptized Catholics, but they believe in heretical things such as artificial birth control and abortion and many, many other disgusting things. They don't believe in transubstantiation. So they're not Catholics at all. They're just a bunch of heretics. But yeah, they're baptized Catholics, and that's how they're counted. So the real number of Catholics is actually very small if you count the faith.
There were some people who are commenting on previous points that you made, Your Excellency, that His Excellency is out of touch. He didn't see all the young people that were baptized at our church. We're packed with young people. And there seems to be an attribution of this to Vatican II, where I can see there has been some kind of reaction culturally to the nonsense that's been going on. And some people have been seeking that out. But there seems to be an attribution of some of these young converts to the Novus Ordo religion as a positive sign.
Well, I mean, the numbers are not there, though. I mean, you look at all the closing churches and look at the overall the seminaries that are empty and the low number of vocations. That's more of a thermometer of what's going on. Most of the people that you see at Mass are gray-haired people like myself, ready, for the grave, no time, and I mean, there's really very few young people, whereas the Fraternity of St. Peter and other groups like that are attracting young families. That's true. They are attracted to that. So, but I would say what is true is that the seminarians in the Novus Ordo, most of them are what you call conservative. You could see some progress with those conservative priests. This synodality business wants to have candidates vetted for being conservative. In other words, if you're a conservative young man, you're not going to our seminary. Well, good luck, in your seminary with 3 or 4 little heretics in it.
Father Cicada used to refer to those as Father Retro. And
yes.
We had one of those Father Retros eventually join the Institute anyway.
Yes.
Father Desay. Father Desay calls himself a retired Father Retro.
Yes, yes. No, but it is true that if you look at these, and I follow the statistics, a large majority of the seminarians are quite conservative. I just heard from one seminarian that was in a local seminary that most of the people that he talked to don't want to say the new Mass. Other seminaries. So most of the fellows that are there don't want to say the new Mass. So there's a ray of hope there, you see. But Vatican II is a complete disaster and a complete flop. So, yeah.
So yesterday and today, Your Excellency, your new glasses are getting rave reviews.
Well, these are my computer glasses. I have actually 9 pairs of glasses. 3 of each kind, some for reading, some for Mass, and some for computer. They're all different. So that means I can put my hand on one of them at any time because they're all over my office and everything. So that's this is just, it's distinctive. So this is my computer glasses.
Okay, fair enough. We have another super chat from St. Mary's Kansas Liquor Store, Your Excellency, for $10.
Right.
Thank you. An indult parish was telling SSPX laity they must contact the local bishop directly to be reconciled. They would be given a penance and undergo a reconciliation ceremony. How many will reconcile?
That's a good question. I mean, with the idea that you can ignore the Pope and throw and thumb your nose at him, I don't think there'll be many people that will defect from the SSPX because they have that idea that we don't have to pay attention to him and everything's invalid and we don't, he can't do that to us. So I think they will retain most of their people and most of their priests. You might see a few, maybe I would say less than 10%, certainly, that might get a little antsy about this whole thing.
1,000. I'm not certain what that currency is, Your Excellency, from DHR 88. But thank you for the contribution. If you have a question, please feel free to put that in the chat, and I'll do my best to find it and ask His Excellency. LP for $10. Thank you, LPRI4XP. What is the best response to SSPX laity who argue that the Sede position implies that the gates of hell have prevailed?
I would throw it right back at them. Your position means that the gates of hell have prevailed. You have a hierarchy that is teaching heresy and giving you a false mass that you will not even accept. You won't even go to it. That's an evil mass for them. I just saw in one of their a book put out by SSPX about an examination of conscience. One of the questions is, have you attended the new mass? And this is among a whole bunch of sins. You see, that is a defected church. The church can do without a pope for a long time, provided the Petrine lineage, that is the succession from St. Peter, is preserved. So there is no defection that way as an institution. But these people are heretics. They, worse than being heretics, they promulgate heresy. If you admit that they are the authority, you are saying the church is defected. So I would throw that right back at them.
There's nothing in scripture and tradition that says that the church will be saved by a small congregation in Switzerland, Your Excellency. It's normally the Roman pontiff that is the rule of faith.
That's right. He must convert, and you should pray for these heretics every day that they convert, just as St. Paul did.
His Excellency says that he prays for it every day, for that
every
conversion. Greg Ponico for $10. Thank you, Greg. If Archbishop Lefebvre lived to see the reign of Bergoglio and Prevost, would it be safe to assume that he would have come to the conclusion that there is no pope?
Absolutely. Knowing Archbishop Lefebvre as I did for many years, I would say without a doubt he would have been a sedevacantist under Bergoglio and Prevost. And even before that, they say, this is hearsay, that he, after 1988, he did not say the Mass una cum. See that he left out those names in the name of the phony popes, and also he made comments even under Paul VI. Father Gapin told me, who was his driver when he was a seminarian. He said this was mid 1970s. I don't think Paul VI is the true pope. He said that to Father Gapin, who was an absolutely reliable witness. I knew him for many years. He would not make that up. So, and he said other things. He said Vatican II is a schismatic council. Now, that's as they say, Dems fighting words.
Right. I don't know what the idiom would translate outside of the United States.
Brooklyn, you can't say that without wrecking the entire Novus Ordo structure or the Novus Ordo religion. Vatican II is its Magna Carta. It's the constitution of the new religion. If you say that was a schismatic council, you're putting it in the same category as Ephesus II, which was called the Robber Council by Pope St. Leo the Great. You see, and it destroys everything that they're doing and saying. Now, he said that. It's a schismatic council. He made many comments that would lead you to conclude that he said that these Vatican II popes are not popes. Father Cicada did an excellent video years ago, Archbishop Lefebvre Sedevacantus ? And he gave all of the quotes that he did that would lead to the conclusion that the Vatican II popes are not true popes.
I would just ask someone in the chat, if you know where that video is, please put that in the chat so that people can access that video.
Probably.
I know it's on Father Cicada's channel. I'm not able to look it up and host the live stream at the same time. Right. A reminder for those who are just joining the stream, if you haven't done so, please hit the like button. It allows people who do not know that this live stream is going on to be alerted through their subscription to the channel. There's almost 400 people watching at the moment, Your Excellency, live. So it's a high view count for this. And I think maybe a slight digression would be useful, Your Excellency, because people who are watching or listening may not understand that you have far more personal knowledge and experience with Archbishop Lefebvre than these 4 new bishops who were children when the Archbishop passed away. So can you explain what your connection is with Archbishop Lefebvre and what your former connection with the SSPX was for people who don't know?
Yes, well, I first met Archbishop Lefebvre on March 15th, 1971. He was coming through New York, and I and 2 other seminarians from the diocese, one of the Diocese of Rockville Center, which is Long Island, the other Diocese of Brooklyn, and I was Diocese of Brooklyn. We were all in the seminary, and we were interested. We had heard about him and his seminary in Switzerland, and he was so kind as to meet with us. And he had Father Peter Morgan. He was then a deacon with him, and he was able to translate for us. At that time, I didn't know enough French to communicate with him. He was on his way to see a fellow bishop of the Congregation of the Holy Ghost, and Archbishop Lefebvre was a member of that congregation, and he's the head of it, actually. And to ask him to found a seminary, to be able to found a seminary like a cone in his diocese. That was the Bishop of Covington. And he later said that all the bishop wanted to talk about was his dog, that he constantly avoided the subject. And so that failed, but that's when I first met him. And then I went over to Acon in 1971 and was there until 1975. And he was there most of the time at that time. And he would give conferences and speak with seminarians. There was a lot of interaction. And then because I was the rector of the seminary, I had a lot of correspondence with him. I have a whole thick pack of letters from him because of just affairs in the concerning the United States and the seminary, buying the new seminary and things like that. And so I had a regular correspondence with him. And then I would see him from time to time. I would go over to Switzerland, or he would come over to the United States, and I would accompany him in various places. So I had a decent amount of he would give conferences at Econ. I remember that. A decent amount of interaction with him. So I knew his mind to a great extent.
And the famous quote you always share is what he said at table about whether you could say that the Pope was not the Pope.
Yes, I don't say that the Pope is not the Pope, but I don't say either that you can't say that the Pope is not the Pope. And he did that in French, and it's quite a...
It's much more of a tongue twister in French than it is in English.
Yeah, pretty good in French.
Are you able to say who the 2 other people who met the Archbishop were at that time, Your Excellency, with you in 1971?
Yes, one was Anthony Ward, who presently operates some sort of monastery in Colorado. He says that he was recently consecrated by some bishop. I don't know who he was. And the other was Clarence Kelly, who became famous. So those are the 2 other seminarians.
So all 3 of you ended up going to the seminary and being ordained by the Archbishop.
Yes, that's correct.
Per matrum ad filium for $40. Thank you. I go to an I don't know whether that's indult or independent, Your Excellency. Probably independent, right? There's no such thing as a non una cum indult. I go to an independent chapel. The mass is non una cum. Some parishioners are openly aligned with the SSPX view on papacy and warn others to stay away from the sedes. Is it honest to be anti-sede and knowingly go to a non una cum mass?
Honest to be anti-sede and knowingly go to a non una cum mass. Well, I would say yes. Again, if you say that man is the Roman pontiff, you shouldn't even be at an SSPX mass. You should be at a one that's approved by the Roman pontiff. The SSPX masses are not even before this. They were not in union with the so-called Roman pontiff. So if you say that he is the Roman pontiff, then you have to go to a mass that is approved by the Roman pontiff and the Catholic hierarchy. See, so it's one way or the other. You can't have your pope and eat him too. It's one way or the other. It's either you're totally with the Novus Ordo hierarchy or you're against them. Anything in between is poppycock and horse feathers.
Something similar to having your yes be yes and your no be no, Your Excellency?
Yes, I just cited that in a sermon on Sunday. And what is beyond this is of evil. That's the rest of that quote from our blessed Lord. What is beyond this is of evil.
Steve Gerard for $10. Thank you, Steve. The whole situation makes me sad and confused. God bless you, Your Excellency.
It is sad and confusing. It is but I think you can keep your head above water in it if you understand the principles.
Sede Trad 47 for $5. Thank you, Sede. Can His Excellency explain the Aryan crisis and the Catholic response to it? I keep hearing SSPX people reference it and liken it to the current crisis.
It doesn't. It's not a good analogy because, first of all, you don't have a pope promulgating heresy. That's the key to this problem. Is you have a pope or someone who claims to be the pope promulgating heresy. That never happened in the Arian heresy. Never. All right. So number one, it's totally different. You had a good deal of bishops, perhaps most of them in the East, who were professing the heresy of Arianism. In the West, much less so. So it was not a universal thing in the church. It was a disease of the East, you might say. And so and then the emperor was always putting his nose in it. That was Constantius. And he was assigning bishops to various places, and he was persecuting Athanasius and various others, Hilary, who were holding out. In that sense, yes, you have a certain analogy that there were many defections, but there were holdouts who held to the faith and triumphed at the end. It is generally true that when any authority promulgates a heresy or promotes a heresy, whether it's ecclesiastical authority or even civil authority, there's general defection. This was true in England, in northern Germany, in Scandinavia. All of those were promoted by the local potentates, all right? And people caved in because of that. I think, for all of the people that actually profess the faith and say, I am Catholic, I accept everything, I think very few actually believe it. They might profess it, they might say yes, but when the storm comes, historically, most of them defect. That's historically. The only exception to that is Ireland, who were pressured by the English to give up their faith, and they went through terrible suffering in order to preserve their faith. Japan, too. There are exceptions to that, but in general, when the pressure comes from on high, and here the pressure has come not from some potentate, some king, but from Rome. You see, and that's why you have such a large defection, because, well, the Pope wants us to do this, you see. And so that's why the question of who is the Roman pontiff and who isn't is of capital importance in this.
Marie Catherine for $2. Thank you, Marie. Can you define formal adherent, Your Excellency? I think this is the words that are used in the decrees, and I suppose not just what that would mean normally speaking, formal adherent, but maybe how Tuccio and the authorities are construing
it. Means that you agree with the positions of the Society of St. Pius X. It doesn't mean that you're just going out of curiosity or somebody's getting married, or it means that you agree with their position, which is the true of, I would say, 99% of their adherents.
So the excuse floated on social media yesterday, Your Excellency, was, well, I can go to the Mass and then I just hold an intention of disagreement all throughout the Mass, and that will show that I'm not a formal adherent to the schism.
Well, again, that's just playing with semantics.
$20 from NovusOrdoWatch.org. We know that website, Your Excellency. Thank you, Novus Ordo Watch. Your Excellency, you were once with the SSPX. At what point did you come to the realization that Paul VI could not be a true pope?
When I read the Liber Accusationis in Paulum Sextum by the Abbé de Nantes, I did that in 1973. That was a whole, I still have it, a whole list of Paul VI's heresies and his heteropraxis. That means evil things that he did, as heretical things that he did that would manifest heresy. And I concluded there's no possible way that this man could be the Pope. So from then on, I realized that.
So from 73 to 83, when you were in the SSPX, you were a sedevacantist and you were known to be a sedevacantist.
No, because I was an opinionist going on then Father Kelly's ideas. See, he was always an opinionist on the question of the papacy, of the modernists. That's how they got away with what they did in 1980. Well, it's our theological opinion that he's not a pope, and Archbishop Lefebvre was okay with that as long as you keep your mouth shut. See, so when Archbishop Lefebvre said, I want you to take the position that he is the Pope, I figured, well, this is an opinion only. I will submit to him because it's only an opinion. See, but later on, I realized that it's not a matter of opinion. And see, and I did more homework, you might say, and later on, after 1983. That's why there was no question of sedevacantism in 1983, because I was already una cum, and the others had the permission to be not una cum as long as they kept their mouths shut. All of the others of the 9, you see. So that's a lie that it was about sedevacantism. Unfortunately, Archbishop Lefebvre told that lie. He said it's because they're sedevacantists and all of this, and he knew that would have more weight than what we were objecting to. You see, so he switched the whole focus to that. You see, so but he had said, that was a few years after he said, I don't say that you can't say that he's not the Pope. So he was very, how would you say, very ambivalent, to say the least. I mean,
or at least tolerant policy-wise in those days.
He went back and forth with all sorts of positions. It was sort of like the position du jour. It was. I mean, according to his reactions, or his, or if he was angry with Paul VI or happy with Paul VI, you can cite Archbishop Lefebvre for anything. Each side can cite him for anything.
Well, and that has persevered among the clergy and the faithful, Your Excellency. I've heard SSPX clergy say they would not go to confession to a Novus Ordo priest, implying invalidity of orders, and that you have an official SSPX position that the 1968 rite of consecration is valid. So you have, even to this day and hour, there are differences in opinion among their faithful and clergy.
That's why I did the directories for the Roman Catholic Institute, that there be absolute clarity about what we stand for and what we hold, because I lived through that back and forth and up and down and round and round, and some days you're in favor, the next day you're not, and depending on the weather in Rome, and so. But that was I just want to make that clear, that in deference to him, I changed my position, because at the time I was an opinionist, and since that time I have abandoned opinionism. So since about 1985, I've been straight non-una cum.
If you're interested in learning more about the directories His Excellency is referring to, you can find that at rcinstitute.org, or you can go to the Roman Catholic Media YouTube page and click on videos, and there was a series called Inside the Institute, which His Excellency did probably in 2023, 2024, in which he talks about comments on the different directories. If you're just coming into the stream, thank you for joining us. Please remember to hit the like button to let people know that this is going on. YouTube will take that as a sign to signal it to more places, and let us know where you are watching or listening from. Your Excellency, the SSPX maintains that excommunications are not acts of infallibility, frequently invoking the case of St. Joan of Arc as a historical counterexample. How would you assess this claim?
First of all, St. Joan of Arc was excommunicated by English bishops. So first, they would have had no jurisdiction in Orleans, obviously. So I mean, that's a whole other, it's incomparable. This comes down from the Roman pontiff. There is no, you can't, first of all, infallibility refers to doctrine, not acts of legal censure. And it is impossible that it is possible that an excommunication could be invalid for one reason or another, because of some problem of fact, or whether you did something or did not do something. But the St. Thomas Aquinas and all of the Catholic theologians say that you must observe the excommunication externally, even if you know that you have been excommunicated falsely. that out of respect to the authority that you must observe it. See, so it doesn't even concern infallibility, and it is strictly possible that it could be a false motive or something false about it. This is not. If he is the Roman pontiff, he is excommunicating those who do not accept Vatican II. He is making Vatican II obligatory, right? Which is clear now. In other words, nobody can say that it's just a council you can reject. All right. He's making Vatican II infallible. He's making it an infallible magisterium if he is the Roman pontiff. See, and that's why this is a battle not of merely consecrating bishops. This is a battle of religions. See, he is excommunicating Roman Catholicism here, the pre-Vatican II Roman Catholicism, and he is showing how it is incompatible with the new religion. That's very good in the sense that the lines are drawn. Now it's up to the SSPX to do battle and not to just, go back and crawl and say, please give us some crumbs from the heretical table.
But you don't assess that the chances that they will do that are very good, Your Excellency.
No, I think that they are all mixed up in the head. And they have this idea that the solution is to somehow become part of the Novus Ordo and to take it over from within or something like that. This is something that goes back to the 1970s with Archbishop Lefebvre, and it has proved wrong. There has to be a frontal assault on the heresies of Vatican II.
Indeed. What do you think would happen if I hold the sede position at my death? Our Lord says I was wrong and should have stayed with the Vatican.
Well, you'll have to ask God that. I can't even comment on that.
I think some people are obviously intimidated by the idea of making a choice against who they consider to be the Holy Father. There's this person wearing a white cassock. Who am I? I'm just making this choice, Your Excellency. And I think there's just a fear there. And how would you address that fear of accepting the Sedevacantists conclusion that some people may naturally have?
Well, if you stay with the Vatican, you have to profess the heresies of Vatican II. See, so then what is God going to say to you? Right.
I think that's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a sede. I occasionally attend an SSPX priory. I primarily attend an Institute of Christ the King Sovereign Priest Mass. But I do love Bishop Sanborn and all my sede brothers in the faith.
Oh, thank you.
I think probably the challenge for Justin is that the Mass he is attending is probably invalid.
I would say so, because of the invalid orders of bishops.
So I think that might be a bigger problem. If you want to join your fellow brothers in the faith and attending a valid Mass, that might be something you want to address.
And also, going back to that, I would not say we're brothers in the faith.
And why not, Your Excellency? Because you said that the SSPX bishops are Catholic.
Accepting Vatican II, by doing that, we are condemning Vatican II. And that's a question of faith.
So Justin, unfortunately, as His Excellency said, for John to be with Mary, Mary has to be with John. So you may consider His Excellency a brother in the faith, but he does not consider you a brother in the faith.
Right.
Sede Trad for $5. Thank you, Sede. What would His Excellency say to those who say it is prideful to say that you are certain of the Sedevacantists conclusion? All these issues are a spiritual distraction.
Well, again, I would go back to the faith. Is Vatican II continuity or rupture? That's the deep question. Is it continuity or rupture? If it is continuity, we should abandon the traditional movement and go and make our peace with Vatican II and all the Vatican II hierarchy. If it is rupture, then it is a sign that these people, it's an absolute and infallible sign that these people who are promulgating it are false. So this is not prideful. This is simply adherence to faith, the indefectibility of the church, which is a dogma. If it is rupture, they are promulgating rupture from Catholicism by the fact that the spirit of truth assists the church. Then we know with absolute certainty that these people are not Roman pontiffs and their hierarchy is false as well. So there's no question of making judgments here. It's a question of respecting what the faith demands of us. It is not a spiritual distraction either.
Hello, Your Excellency. I'm watching your broadcast from Nantes. Thank you for all that you are doing for our chapel. May God continue to bless and strengthen you in your ministry.
Thank you.
It's a more convenient time for the French, Your Excellency, when it's early in the morning in the United States. It's the middle of the afternoon over there. Greg Panico for $5. Thank you, Greg. If the church one day is restored and Vatican II is annulled, will the church look back on Pope St. Pius X and give him the title the Great?
He deserves more than any pope in the history of the church the title the Great, because he saw what was coming with his supernatural insight and it laid out all of the ways in which to prevent it. And unfortunately, his successors failed to do that. And that's why we have what we have. He is the great one. And he did everything right in his pontificate. Great saint.
Does His Excellency know of any Sedevacantist priests who defend the validity of the new rite of consecration?
I don't know of any. There may be. I don't know.
Why do you think there is a clear connection between the two, Your Excellency, that all Sedevacantist clergy, in all likelihood, do not consider the new rite of episcopal consecration valid?
Well, I think that the SSPX has a reason to say that it's valid, because you can't do business, so to speak, with the Novus Ordo and try to be a part of the Novus Ordo if you're saying that their bishops are invalid. You see, so they have this motive to say this. Archbishop Lefebvre said in 1988 that he thought that all of the Novus Ordo sacraments were at least doubtful because of lack of intention. He said that in the fall of 1988. I put that in my newsletter. But if you're trying to be part of the Novus Ordo establishment, then you have to say all their sacraments are valid. See, so they have that, external motive. But Sedevacantists aren't interested in making peace with the Vatican inmates of the heretical inmates of the Vatican, as I call them. So they are, I would say, more objective about what they did to the episcopal consecration. And that is they incorporated the heresy that you receive jurisdiction by your consecration. That is something that is false. And whenever you have something false in a sacramental form, it's invalid. That's a general principle.
Where do I find a bishop like Bishop Sanborn in Switzerland? How should I search? I apologize for ignorance. I'm going to put a link in the chat to the Institute of a Mother of Good Counsel. They have masses in Switzerland. So if you look at the page that I linked, if you scroll down, you'll see masses. But I suppose you could always try to get His Excellency to come out and visit Switzerland.
I lived there for 4 years. 4 years I lived in Switzerland. Beautiful country, magnificent, beautiful country. Everything about it is right.
You won't have any problem convincing him to no,
I'd go to Switzerland in a heartbeat.
Speaking of things that can be recommended, Stephen Griffith for $2. Thank you, Stephen. Elaine Andreski is recruiting me to come to Our Lady Queen of Martyrs. The legendary Elaine Andreski, Your Excellency.
Yes, the legendary Elaine Andreski. Well, you should give in. And she will pester you until you do. So you might as well just give in now.
She believes in proselytism, Your Excellency.
No, she does.
Someone asking, again, this might be someone who's never been to this channel, never seen you before, unfamiliar with the traditional Catholic position, Your Excellency. What about the Divine Mercy and Medjugorje? What would you say to people who ask about this?
The Divine Mercy devotion was condemned, I think, by Pius XI, if I'm not mistaken, or it's a condemned devotion. So that's something that you should have nothing to do with. And Medjugorje is certainly a bogus apparition. That's where Our Lady supposedly said something favorable about the Muslims, which is just contrary to everything that is holy and right. And so I would say just get away from both of those things.
And another telltale sign about Medjugorje, they're apparently still having visions to this day, and none of the so-called seers have joined the religious life, but almost always when someone has seen Our Lady, they join the religious life. That's just part of the deal.
Yes, I think that would be, if you had a true apparition, I think you'd be very much inclined to do that.
I think this person is just a variation of what he'd said earlier, but I want to acknowledge and thank the super chat. God, at my death, God, our Lord says I was wrong, should not have left the local diocese, and I think you've addressed that already, Your Excellency. This is, I think, around religious liberty. If toleration was defended by traditional popes, isn't it right to say individuals should be free from coercion by the state, or is that a legitimate doctrine?
Yes, Leo XIII said, in certain circumstances and for a serious reason, the state can tolerate false religions, but that doesn't mean that you have a right. Toleration simply means to look the other way. It is not a permission. It is to look the other way. For example, when you are over the speed limit on the highway, the police have a certain toleration, and they look the other way. They could, if you're one over, they could go and give you a ticket. They could, but there's a certain toleration. It's not a permission, but they look the other way. So that's what toleration is. The object of toleration is an evil. The object of right is a good. So you're not getting a right if you're being tolerated. That's a very important distinction. So in countries where there are many, many religions, such as, for example, the Russian Empire, at the time of Leo XIII, I mean, all sorts of religions there, it would be prudent to tolerate some in most cases. So, but that's a judgment that has to be made in each case. But the principle is there that you could tolerate for a serious reason.
Is the Pope bound by certain conditions when issuing an excommunication, or can he excommunicate someone simply because he doesn't like him?
By prudence, he is bound by certain conditions. So he can't say you're excommunicated because I don't like the way you wear your hair or something like that. That would be obviously a false and invalid excommunication. But anything that concerns the discipline of the church, for example, he is not bound by any conditions. No, he makes the conditions. He can wipe them away. He's the supreme head of the church.
So Steve Gerard for $5. Thank you, Steve. Maybe now I'll be able to get people together in Chicago to get mass here. Steve has brought this up on various live streams. Actually, he's making the case to get clergy out there to say mass.
Let's get some priests together who can say the mass. We're very, very stretched out right now.
Audrey Bigelow for $10. Thank you, Audrey. Is invincible ignorance a tenet of sedevacantism, or is this element a heresy only applicable to the Novus Ordo? Can those outside Catholic religion, I think they mean to say the Catholic religion, receive salvation at all? Thank you, Your Excellency.
Anybody can be invincibly ignorant about anything. You could be invincibly ignorant about the speed limit on the highway. It simply means that it's an ignorance that is very difficult to overcome. See, whereas vincible ignorance is an ignorance that is easy to overcome if you just did something simple to find out. Vincible ignorance, an example of vincible ignorance is the doctor who is going to remove someone's leg in the operating room, and he says, I don't know which one I have to take off. I'll take the right one off. See, and it's, of course, the wrong one, that's vincible ignorance. You see, he could have easily found out in a few minutes which one was the bad leg. You see, so invincible ignorance is possible with anybody. It's not really a tenet of any, it's just you could be ignorant about anything. So this probably means that, can you be invincibly ignorant of the truth of the Catholic faith? Yes, you can. That's the teaching of the church. Invincible ignorance does not justify you, but it is a condition of the baptism of desire. That is, that you can implicitly desire to be of the true Christian religion. And you're invincibly ignorant. You cannot find out, or it's very difficult for you to find out which one it is. But if you want to belong to the true religion of Christ, that means you're implicitly desiring to be a Catholic. And that would be sufficient for baptism of desire, provided there are other conditions. In other words, that you have perfect contrition for sin, and that you also have supernatural faith. But you see, that would take me a long time to explain all of that. But that's it in a nutshell. You see, so
and do you know what you're saying? Those are very high bars. It's not as if this is just available to anyone on the street.
Right. That's right. But it's against the Catholic faith to say that there's no baptism of desire. That's a heresy.
If I wanted to remain Catholic in Brisbane, Australia, where would I go? I have nowhere to go.
Don't we say mass in Brisbane?
We do, Your Excellency. I was going to say, this person, I think, has come across a very fortunate situation. I'm putting in the chat a link to the website for the apostolate in Australia. They have mass regularly in Brisbane, so it's not true that you have nowhere to go. Now, not everybody has that possibility. As Steve noted, he would like to have mass in Chicago. So would you believe, Your Excellency, we don't have mass in Chicago, but we do have mass in Brisbane.
Well, we have a lot of competition in Chicago, but Chicago is a big place, and there's a lot of Catholics in Chicago, so I think it would be a good place as long as we're not too close to somebody else. But that's something to explore. We could go to Chicago eventually, but we need priests. You have to send your young men to the seminary. We need priests.
In the practical order, there's definitely lots of flights going to Chicago all the time, Your Excellency. So
it's easy to get to, yes, but it's that awful airport.
Mr. Clean for $5. Thank you, Mr. Clean. How is a peasant like me supposed to know that the new rite of episcopal consecration is invalid?
Well, that is beyond your scope if you are a peasant. This is high theology, you might say. This is something that requires a great deal of theological acumen and also a great deal of research. So you are not capable of doing that. You'd have to know Latin. You would have to know the history of the church, and you have to have access to a big library of theological books. So no, don't feel bad about that. It's just I think you should trust the clergy who have researched this.
Many people would like to see more priests in Poland. Since we're not supposed to go to the Fraternity of St. Peter, what is the alternative, Your Excellency?
Well, we're hoping to send a priest next year to Poland. So his name is Pawlowski. I'm pronouncing it in the Polish way. I tried to learn Polish and I gave it up. It's the hardest language I ever looked at. But anyway, but we have to coordinate that with Father Tritek, and Father Bishop Selway is right now in Germany, and I'm asking him to go and see Father Tritek to arrange all that, to see where, if he wants the priest and where he would work, etc. So, but that's on it's on the agenda to do that. Father Tritek says mass in Krakow and Warsaw and Wrocław. I know that. So, but Poland is a big place, and I don't know where you live, but he does say mass in those places.
And if I might add, Your Excellency, if many people want priests in Poland, they might send vocations from Poland.
Yes, correct.
That's the easiest solution to the problem.
Yes, send vocations.
Can you briefly explain how the magisterium works, Your Excellency? SSPX advocates often claim that encyclicals are not necessarily infallible and may contain errors, so they need not be accepted.
No, that's false. The magisterium happens when there is something that is contained in sacred scripture or tradition, and it is taught by the Pope and the majority of bishops in the world. That is known as ordinary universal magisterium. Then there is solemn magisterium, where the Pope or a general council pronounces something definitively. That's called solemn or extraordinary magisterium. All right. An encyclical can contain all sorts of things. It can contain solemn magisterium, it can contain universal ordinary magisterium, or it could just be some comments about the Pope that the Pope makes about certain things. You see, so to say it has nothing to do with the manner in which something is presented. It has to do with this language that the Pope uses in saying something. For example, Casti Connubii was given by Pius XI. In it, he condemns solemnly, and everybody took it as solemn magisterium, the fact that artificial birth control is mortally sinful. See, he was very emphatic about that. Certain other, it all depends on those conditions, and it doesn't matter whether he puts it in a bull or anything at all. If those conditions that I mentioned are met, you have infallible magisterium.
He could put a post on social media.
He could. He actually could. It doesn't. The vehicle doesn't matter. But yes, contain errors. Point out an error. Show me an error in an encyclical. Go ahead. Before Vatican II, the it could he contain an error like citing sacred scripture and saying St. John says this when in fact St. Matthew said it? Yes, he could do that. See, something like that he could do, an error like that, or some sort of historical error he could make like that. Yes.
But that's not a meaningful error, as you would note. You're actually some sort of clerical error.
No, that's just another way for the SSPX to wriggle out of having to accept Vatican II magisterium.
Not just that, but to attack the church's teaching on the papacy and the prerogatives of the Holy Father. The SSPX consistently attack the powers of the Holy Father.
Yes.
We have someone named Brian Walsh, Your Excellency, for $50.
Who he is.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Your Excellency, for being the tip of Christ's spear of Catholic truth for 51 years. Please turn on a fan and stay cool in the extreme heat. God bless you and all the Institute clergy.
Thank you very much.
Your Excellency, do you know there are more people who die in Europe from heat than in the U.S. from gun deaths?
Yes, I don't understand that.
It's a big shocker.
That is a big shocker. There's a lot of people that die from gunfire here.
People may not realize it is the 51st anniversary of your priestly ordination, Your Excellency. So congratulations and ad multos annos.
Yes.
You were also in a cone at the end of June yourself some years ago. So you're familiar with what it's like.
51 years ago, yes. It was not that warm now. I mean, but that was known, the cone was known, that valley was known as the California of Europe because it was always dry and at the same time warm. It was surrounded by mountains, and that's why they had a lot of grape growing there too. So it was very seldom really uncomfortable there. Very seldom.
There are no SSPX chapels near me or Sede chapels. I've come to the conclusion that the current Rome is in apostasy. What should I do?
Say your rosary for one thing. If you're faithful to the rosary, the Japanese were cut off from the Catholic clergy for centuries, and they remained faithful by their rosary. Also, if you could go once a year, twice a year, make some big effort. I don't know where you live, but make some big effort to get to a true mass. I would suggest that you do that. There's a lot of people in that state, a lot of people that are very far away from where mass is, and we are limited in the number of priests we have. So I would urge them to do that.
Has anyone corrected the Pope on any of his heresies?
Well, correct. We have published a great deal of literature on the heresies of Vatican II and post-Vatican II. Corrected the Pope. I mean, that would be someone like Cardinal Burke, maybe, or some of these conservative bishops. I mean, they would be in a position to do that, but they are too afraid to do that. They should themselves make a liber accusationis, a book of accusation, and say, these are your errors. You need to recant of them. Otherwise, we will say that you are not a true Pope. But they're all afraid. They are like all the ones that ran away from our Lord in the Garden of Gethsemane. They're afraid.
I'm not entirely certain here, actually, is the canon law of Pope Pius V abrogated?
There was no canon law of Pope Pius V. So.
You might explain to people, I think everyone's used to this idea of there being a code of canon law. What actually existed prior to that time?
It was called the Corpus Juris Canonici, the body of canon law, and it was sort of a collection of all sorts of decrees. And because it was so confusing to figure out which decree applied, Pius X said it has to be condensed and rewritten in such a way that it's simple. And that was the 1917 Code of Canon Law. But Pius X, although he had been dead for a few years, was principally responsible for that codification of law. If you look at the old books, which we have in the library, I mean, it's just it'd be impossible to figure out many times what is the law. See, so under Pius V, you still had the old big collection of various laws.
$10 from Lucy B. I think Lucy might be one of the parishioners up in Lawrence, Your Excellency, in Massachusetts.
All right.
Your Excellency, how would you explain the Sedevacantists' position to someone who believes we are not in communion with Rome? What would be the main points that would be important to explain?
Believes that we are not in communion with Rome. Well, that we uphold papal authority. See, so it's not a question of breaking with the Pope. We're saying that these men are not true popes, but we of course believe in the papacy and look forward to a true pope. So in that sense, we haven't broken communion with Rome in that sense. The Sedevacantist position is very clear. As I said, it is demanded by the indefectibility of the church. The indefectibility of the church is a dogma. And so if you're saying that these people, and it's true that they have promulgated falsehood in the name of the church, heresies in the name of the church, you must conclude by the dogma of indefectibility that they cannot be true popes. And that does not offend the papacy in any way. It actually defends the papacy, because you're saying that the true pope is incapable of these things by the assistance given by the Holy Ghost.
$100 from Andrew McFarlane. Thank you, Andrew. God bless the new vocations of the Sisters of St. Thomas Aquinas.
Yes, they do wonderful work.
We have a request for a priest in Sochi, Russia, Your Excellency.
That's one of those. That's a resort in southern Russia.
It is. It's a very beautiful area as well as in terms of weather. So it wouldn't be a tough ass weather-wise.
One of the gazillion places you've been to.
No, I haven't. I still have to get a visa to get into Russia. But
all right, no time. No one, I don't think.
From the perspective of the Catholic Church, are Eastern Orthodox people able to be saved? Are the saints from the so-called Eastern Orthodox Church recognized as saints, or does one assume they were not saved?
Well, any non-Catholic can qualify for salvation, in other words, by an implicit desire to be part of the Catholic Church. And what I said previously, maybe he didn't hear it, but you have to have perfect contrition for sin, and you have to have the virtue of faith, supernatural virtue of faith, at least in certain things. And that's disputed by theologians what you need to adhere to. But in any case, you have to adhere to certain truths of the faith. All right, so that would apply to Protestants and to Eastern Schismatics. The saints from the Eastern Orthodox are not recognized as saints by the Roman Catholic Church.
And I think just a final answer here, Your Excellency, for this person, the only thing keeping me from adopting Sedevacantism is the fear of being wrong when I die and going to hell. For those who may have that same fear,
I would fear more the having denied implicitly even the indefectibility of the church, which is a dogma.
That's far more fearsome, or far more likely than what's happening now. If you are just coming into the stream or you haven't done so already, please remember to hit the like button. That will be helpful to getting the word out, and let us know where you are watching or listening from. Is it true that St. Pius X reformed the breviary significantly? I've heard this from scholars who say that it created a precedent for further drastic liturgical reform.
It is true that he did reform the breviary significantly, yes. Leo XIII added a lot of saints to the breviary. And the problem at the old breviary was that you would have the Sunday office. If there were a saint, you would have the Sunday office every single day. So every single day you were saying the same office. And so he saw that as a problem. And so he changed it so that ordinarily you're saying Monday on Monday, Tuesday on Tuesday, etc. So he did say that there were further changes to be made in his Divinum, I forgot the name of the document, but not the John the 23rd. He did not foresee anything like that. John the 23rd stripped it down, and it copied actually the Jansenist breviary of the 18th century to a great extent. There are certain other things. Some of the there was some call at the First Vatican Council for making sure that all of the stories about the saints were accurate. See, because those are not considered infallible in any way. In other words, sometimes things can creep into stories about saints that need to be verified. You see, so probably he meant that there were other things to be done, other reforms, but not the reform of John the 23rd. He also wanted the Vulgate actually to be corrected. The Vulgate Psalter, that means the Psalms, he felt needed to be in better Latin, and so he actually founded a commission with the Benedictines to do that.
A little bit of skepticism about my gunshot wound statistic, Your Excellency. More people die in Europe from heat than gunshot wounds. Sounds very much like the typical MSM propaganda we experience here in Europe. Therese, I have nothing against. I lived in Europe for 10 years. His Excellency lived in Europe for many years. We love Europe for many reasons, but I'm going to provide you the receipts. There is a chart and there's statistics in a Fortune magazine article, which I shared in the chat, and you can go look at it yourself. I just don't think that it's a crime to have air conditioning, Your Excellency. It's not a sin to have air conditioning.
Well, and, usually they don't see these temperatures in Europe, though. I don't think.
It is extraordinary.
Yes.
Jimmy Hunjin for 20 pounds. The live stream is now valid and listed, Your Excellency. Up until now, we were operating illegally, but now we have a valid and listed live stream. And someone had commented that he could be called Jimmy 100 instead of Jimmy Hunjin, Your Excellency. So, Jimmy, you've got to up that 20 pounds. That's not living up to your name. In his sermon at the SSPX consecrations, Father Pagliarani stated they want the Pope to stop being humiliated, as though Leo isn't responsible for what is happening around him. Can you refute this myth, Your Excellency?
Refute it? I mean, it's again.
If only the Holy Father knew.
I mean, Leo knows exactly what he's doing. You can tell he's a person who is very, how would you say, focused, to say the least. He knows exactly what he's doing. This all comes from Leo. This is not his entourage or anything like that. That's crazy. No, he's not some old fogey that is in a wheelchair or something and they're telling him what to do. He is an American. Americans are very active and practical. And it's just, I mean, it's fantasy land. It's just another way of somehow escaping the reality that living in a fantasy world that the SSPX lives in. Just one more stupid way.
Jimmy follows up for 10 pounds. Thank you, Jimmy. Is Father Cicada's work of human hands compulsory reading at the seminary?
When we do his course, yes. But that goes in a cycle. So no one could do that better than Father Cicada. He destroyed the new Mass with quotes from all of its contributors and makers, the people that fashioned it. It's a wonderful work, yes.
It's the work of 30 years. Maybe the work of human hands, but I think work of many decades for Father Cicada.
He was a great researcher. Father Cicada was a great researcher.
As Bishop Sanborn has said, he had the nerve to leave us when he was at the peak of his powers.
I don't forgive him for dying on us. I hold that against him.
He would get, for those who don't know Father Cicada, he would definitely laugh along with that.
Oh, he was.
As someone had answered that the person worrying about being wrong at his or her death, Your Excellency, as I mentioned before, Why Do Traditionalists Fear Sedevacantism by Father Cicada is worth watching.
Yes.
And there was another one based on an article that I did many years ago, Your Excellency, What Should I Tell Aunt Helen? Sedevacantism. Yes. This is based on an old 1980s article of Father Cicada. So this has been addressed. People have been afraid of sedevacantism for many years, as we addressed in the beginning of the stream. If you watch Ben-Hur and you see the Roman soldier go down and see lepers, that's how people feel about sedevacantism. And all of us who came to the sedevacantism conclusion, we were on the other side of that fear at one point. Another, I think these are 1,000 yen, Your Excellency, from MXJH. So thank you, MXJ. Your Excellency, did John of St. Thomas teach that a manifestly heretical pope would remain as a true pope with all papal authorities from Christ, as long as he is not thus judged by the church?
The answer is yes. John of St. Thomas was, just to let people know, a very eminent Thomist theologian from 1500s maybe, or around there. And he said that, and Cajetan, another very famous Thomist theologian, said the same thing. Now that's manifestly heretical pope. That is not a pope teaching heresy. That's very important to make that distinction. So you're talking about a pope that pronounces a heresy and adheres to a heresy, not something that he said by mistake. And that's their theory. Now, St. Robert Bellarmine and others said, no, he automatically falls from the papacy once he is a public heretic. But in order for that to have a juridical effect, he must be declared juridically by the College of Cardinals. See, and most people leave that out on Bellarmine. He says that in one place, but later on he says he needs a juridical declaration to actually juridically fall from the papacy. See, so actually, St. Robert Bellarmine upholds the thesis. So I agree with St. Robert Bellarmine. I don't agree with John of St. Thomas or Calvin, because there is an intimate connection between the Pope and the faith. Also, if he is a heretic, just personally, how could you believe anything he says? Because when he teaches something, how could you possibly, is this correct? I mean, he's a heretic. See, he doesn't have the faith. So how could you believe anything that he says with regarding the faith? You see, so that's why I think, yes, public heresy is incompatible, intrinsically incompatible with the papacy, but it does need a declaration for a juridical effect.
You're saying, I think it might be useful here to talk about the weight of, let's say, a theologian on his own, someone like John of St. Thomas, versus the weight of a doctor of the church and the different theological opinions. I think you said in a previous live stream something along like the number 6 related to like common theologians. Let's say 6 of those would be equivalent to a teaching of the doctor of the church.
Well, 6, yes. In other words, in moral theology, a probable opinion needs only one doctor. So, in other words, if you can cite one doctor, St. Alphonsus, for what we call a probable opinion, that is something that is not certain, but which is subject to probability, may be true, may be false. In other words, that requires one doctor or 6 minor theologians. That would be typically people who have written books and are regarded as theologians by the Catholic Church. See, so, but doctor is very significant in that sense. So one St. Alphonsus is worth 6 minor theologians.
Jimmy Hunjin, 10 pounds. Thank you, Jimmy. I still laugh thinking of Father Chicata's quip that the handshake of peace ought to be relocated to the donut table in the church hall.
Yes, typical Father Cicata. Yes, yes.
Again, Your Excellency, you had said, I want to point out that you're vindicated here. His Excellency had originally said, I want to say 6 months ago when this was announced, or more recently, 4 months ago, that he thought it would be ignored by Tuccio and other people like that. But that later on he changed his mind and he said, actually, I think they're going to come down pretty hard. And you've been vindicated, Your Excellency, a personal excommunication, not just for the bishops, but for the clergy, and a notice to the faithful, don't think about going either. This is a schism, and they then have to decide, do the words of the representatives of the man they consider to be the Holy Father mean anything in their lives, or is it just whatever they feel like?
Right. It is necessary for salvation that you be subject to the Roman Pontiff, and subject does not mean a picture on the wall. It means that you obey him. That's necessary for salvation. If you disobey the Roman Pontiff in anything that is serious, and this is serious, you go to hell.
Father Cicada, and you have said, I think also, Your Excellency, one does not negotiate with the Roman Pontiff, he submits to him.
Right.
Jimmy Hunjin for 50 pounds. Thank you, Jimmy. Did his
Yes.
Excellency... he hit the mandatory 100, Your Excellency.
Okay.
Did His Excellency...
Does that mean your background is a Hun? Is that...
He'll have to address that. Did His Excellency recently see the celebration of 50 years of a gay marriage at a Novus Ordo church in London, presided over by a cardinal? One wonders when they'll be receiving their letter of excommunication from Touchy Fernandez.
No, that's only one of many things. In Fresno, California, you had a Catholic bishop laying hands upon, I think, an Episcopalian during an Episcopalian's ceremony. That means Anglican. Making a phony bishop. He's up there in the sanctuary putting hands upon this person. You see, so no, there's also those the German clergy are just in outer space with all kinds of things like that. women deacons and all, so no, no, he's not going to get excommunicated. This is a new religion. If you do something that is in accordance with the new religion, even if you're a little overboard, you might get a slap on the wrist, but you're not getting excommunicated.
And I think that's one of the things that's so surprising, Your Excellency. All these other things happen, but how dare you say the Latin Mass? How dare you have problems with Vatican II? And in a sense,
it's not the Latin Mass, it's Vatican II.
Yes, and I think, as you said earlier in the stream, Your Excellency, in a certain sense, this is a very good thing because it brings the discussion of Vatican II into the mainstream, into the New York Times. So,
Yes.
in a sense, we have to be, in a way, grateful to the SSPX for making this move because it's brought this
Yes.
topic out. But now they have to follow through, as you say, by
And
calling a spade a spade.
I am pessimistic. I hope they do, but I don't think they will because of various reasons.
The mainstream media are referring to this consecration as pseudo-consecrations. Could you address this, please?
Well, pseudo, that means false. They're not false at all. They are perfectly valid. So whoever said that doesn't know what he's talking about.
Classic objection here, Your Excellency, from our Institute of Christ the King attender who's attending an invalid mass in all likelihood. I don't know if Leo is the Pope or not. We had saints on both sides of the dual Pope era in the 13 and 1400s. This is above my pay grade. I am simply trying to live the faith of my great-grandparents.
Well, there is an essential difference between the Great Western Schism, which he's referring to here, and what we have now. In the Great Western Schism, there were 2 and finally 3 different popes. Any one of those popes could have been valid because they were all Catholics and teaching the Catholic faith. What we have now are so-called popes teaching falsehood, teaching heresy, right? So it's an entirely different situation. And yes, it was confusing at that time, but it's not confusing now because if you simply look at what the Catholic Church taught in the past and what these false popes are teaching now, you must conclude that there is a rupture. If I said to you 2 + 2 = 5, your mind rebels. Oh, that's ridiculous. It doesn't equal 5. You see, and suppose you had a mathematics teacher that got up and said 2 + 2 = 5. Wouldn't you complain to the management of the university that this man is a nut and he's teaching that 2 + 2 = 5? Well, you have greater certitude of your faith than you have about mathematics. All right. And these people are teaching faith, and when they, teaching heresy, and your faith rebels against that. That's impossible. And that draws certain conclusions. It is impossible that the church is teaching me falsehood. Then you not only do you conclude that they are not Roman pontiffs, they cannot be Roman pontiffs because the faith is absolute and cannot be denied. We must die before we would accept something contrary to faith.
Well, I was going to say, to follow your example, if your math professor says 2 + 2 = 5, you don't say, well, that's above my pay grade. Maybe it is. We'll have to wait for a future math council to decide whether 2 + 2 is not. Father Cicada always answered this. You're actually, maybe you'll say, well, it's above my pay grade. I can't do that. It says, yes, but what are you going to do now? And the answer is not to go to an invalid mass and pretend that you are in communion with people who are attacking the Catholic faith.
Also, you cannot remain in doubt about something that pertains to eternal salvation. You can't say, I don't know if he is or not. You have to resolve that doubt because it pertains to eternal salvation that you be submitted to the Roman pontiff. You have to decide who is and who is not the Roman pontiff. You cannot remain in doubt. That would be actually mortally sinful.
Brian Benson, I think we might know that person, Your Excellency.
I heard him.
Vaguely. For $20, thank you, Brian. Anything Smoochie Fernandez says, I would do the opposite, logically speaking.
I agree with that, yes. Yeah. He doesn't need any explanations.
Right. If Leo was so worried about people losing the sacraments, he could have called off Tuccio and read Benedict. I don't exactly know what that means, Your Excellency, but it might mean that someone thinks that Benedict was this wonderful, amazing Holy Father who gave us the Latin Mass. How would you address that?
He was a flaming heretic, and he was a flaming heretic, modernist heretic from the time of the 1950s. I remember when I was in the modernist seminary, he, Ronner, and Schillebeck's were considered to be the radical modernists. That was back in the 1960s. Radical modernists. I mean, that was just common knowledge among everybody. Ratzinger, he's off the wall. Then because he said when he was in charge of the Holy Office that we shouldn't try to convert Jews and that they have their own path to salvation. He said that. He said that a mass without a consecration is valid. That's some people in the East were the Nestorians suppressed the consecration on the mass, and the only thing that made him quote unquote traditional was the fact that he wore red shoes. He wore the velvet half cape with the fur on it and a very nice velvet cap, red cap with fur, beautiful miters, beautiful vestments, all of the nice stuff. And he permitted the traditional mass. And then he's wonderful. That's because Catholics are starving for a true Catholic Pope. And when they do a few things like that, oh, there he is. There's the true Catholic Pope. See, and it's just pure externals, and it's nothing to, he was a flaming modernist heretic. It's, when, people start eating all sorts of, they eat bugs and everything when they're starving to death. And Catholics are, in a way, starving to death for a true Pope. And so they're very willing to see something that is superficial as something substantial.
I'd say one of the several listeners are thinking this way, Yorksia. There's something wrong with every part of these sentences here. I will support SSPX anyway, despite the fact that they deny the authority of the man they consider to be the Holy Father. Pope Leo is the Pope. Fernandez is a heretic. Someone employed by the man who I consider to be the Pope is a heretic, and he's publicly proclaiming on my behalf. Unfortunately, there are people who are watching or listening for the first time. What would you say to people who are thinking this way? I'm going to support the SSPX anyway. The Pope is the Pope. Fernandez is a heretic.
You can't have your Pope and eat him too. In other words, you cannot thumb your nose at the Pope and say your excommunication is invalid and so forth. We're going to do our own thing. But you're the Pope. You see, that your obedience to the Pope is necessary for salvation. SSPX is disobedient to the Pope on paper. That is, objectively speaking, they are a means of damnation because of that, if Pope Leo is a true Pope.
I think a clarification on the Benedict issue that was just read, so a more clarified chat. It means that Leo could have backed off and sought a hermeneutic of continuity, that sort of Benedict option, I guess, if he believed that excommunications would deprive the faithful of the sacraments.
No, first of all, hermeneutic of continuity is assigned to Ratzinger falsely. If you read his statement, that was in December of, it was right before or after Christmas, to the cardinals in, I forget what year, but I think it was his first time. And he talked about three hermeneutics. One was of rupture, one was of continuity, and the other was of reform. And he sided with the hermeneutic of reform. But the conservatives say, oh, hermeneutic of continuity. There he said it. He was simply giving three types of hermeneutics, which essentially means interpretation. He always used fancy words to make people believe that he was intelligent. And he was intelligent. But that's typical of people who, hermeneutic. So you have to know Greek to know hermeneutic. You see, it's interpretation. And so he sided with hermeneutic of reform. If you read the text, all right, so it's false to say that he was for hermeneutic of continuity. And that's like saying, there is no continuity. How can you have a hermeneutic of continuity? Continuity is to condemn Vatican II and say it's a false council. That's continuity.
Well, I think also, to your extent, I think during the Francis Watch era, you had said that hermeneutic is just a word you take for a pill that you can pop whenever you hear something offensive to the Catholic faith. Yes. You can just pop a hermeneutic.
Yes.
And Tom Dubé, one of the faithful in Harrisburg, actually created a prescription bottle with that and says, take one, anytime you hear a traditional Catholic teaching.
Yes.
Katholischwerg? for €6. Thank you.
Scherweg.
Scherweg.
Katholischer Weg. That's the Catholic way in German. Katholischer Weg.
This is what's nice about having someone who understands some German on the stream, Your Excellency. What is the most important truth about the Catholic faith that is being lost today, and what would you say directly to Catholics who are confused?
I would say the most important truth that is being denied by the Novus Ordo is that the Catholic Church is the one true church outside of which there is no salvation. This is, in the Arian heresy, you had the divinity of Christ that was attacked. In this heresy, you have, quote unquote, the divinity of the church. That is, the church as a divinely founded institution, which is necessary for salvation. That is being attacked. Ecumenism is the soul of Vatican II. Everything else that it did was in favor of ecumenism, including religious liberty. So I would say that is the central issue.
Is it at all possible that the consecrations and subsequent excommunications could lead to some closer ties between the SSPX and Sedevacantist groups like His Excellency runs?
They would have to take the Sedevacantist position. That is the sort of the rock that exists between us and them. I mean, we're both adhering to the Catholic faith, obviously, but it is the problem. If they would conclude to the Sedevacantist position, yes, that would be, yes, there are liturgical differences, but I think we could convince them of the wisdom of our liturgical position. They took the John the 23rd in order to be presentable to the Novus Ordo.
It's a change. It's a difference in strategy. Your Excellency. Are you trying to join this thing, or are you standing on the fact that Vatican II is not Roman Catholicism, as you've said before?
Yes,
I think it might be useful. Your Excellency. There's so many people watching the stream who've never seen you before, who don't understand, and so it might be useful to go back to the principles you enunciated in the London conference and talk about the 3 different reactions to Vatican II, so people can get a better understanding of what it is that you are saying. They may not know.
I can't remember. I would need notes in front of me.
Well, you had said that if Vatican II has the reaction from the Fraternity of St. Peter, from the Society of St. Pius X, and Sedevacantism, and these are the 3 different possible reactions to Vatican II. Could you go into that a little bit?
Well, yes. The Fraternity of St. Peter is to accept Vatican II and simply carve out a life of liturgical antiquity, you might say. John the 23rd, which is not really antiquity, it's substantially a traditional mass, I would say that, but has been unfortunately reformed. The SSPX is to reject Vatican II as something that is not necessary to accept because it's a pastoral council, and so we can do our own thing, so to speak, independently of the Vatican, and we don't have to pay attention to them. But he's the Pope, and so therefore we're not out of communion with the Pope. See, that's the SSPX. And Sedevacantism is that because these Vatican II so-called popes are promulgating heresy, it is impossible that they be true Roman pontiffs. That's the spectrum, you might say, of reaction to Vatican II.
$20 from Tom Mastriani. I think we know someone named that, Your Excellency.
I think so.
From Tommy Mastriani, thank you, Your Excellency. Prayers to the Sacred Heart for the conversion of our country as it approaches its 250th birthday. Tom says, or whatever we're calling it. It's not too late to turn things around.
Yes, that would be a whole other video. The state of the United States and the reasons for it. Yes, but not now.
Not today. July 3rd, right before. Jimmy Hunjan, £5. Thank you, Jimmy. Hermeneutic of continuity, the unicorn in the forest, whose horse feathers the adulterers never cease to seek.
Yes. Yes. It is. You can't favorably interpret Vatican II. It is bold-faced in its heresies, and there's no possible fixing it with a Band-Aid. It has to be rejected. It has to be rescinded. It has to be burned. That's the only way out of this.
If the Pope has the power to revoke or confirm validity on the sacrament of confession, how can the new rite of episcopal consecration be considered doubtful if it was approved by the Pope?
Well, then we get back to whether he's the Pope or not. See, I mean, there's a deeper question here.
And so you
He
would
is the
note
Pope,
that who is the
then his sacraments would be valid.
who was the Pope at the time of the promulgation of the new rite of episcopal consecration, Your Excellency?
It was Paul VI,
So
1968.
so you maintain that Paul VI was not a pope, so it doesn't matter that he approved of it because he wasn't the Roman pontiff.
Correct.
We are getting close to our usual limit for His Excellency. We try to limit it to 2 hours these days of him answering questions nonstop from all over the world. So we're at about an hour and 50 minutes. So I want to say this is the final 10 minutes of the stream. If you have a question you'd like to ask, His Excellency, remember we ask all sorts of questions here, but super chats get priority just because there are so many questions that
Sure.
come into the chat. So we'll give another 10 minutes to those questions. Someone has said that you are Iron Man for going through all of this, Your Excellency.
I might expire because of the heat. We're supposed to see 101 degrees in the Celsius. That'd be about 39.
Well, people are worried for your health, Your Excellency. I don't watch him often, but he looks much thinner than the last time I saw him. Is he okay?
Well, that's a good thing, you know. I mean, it's no, I'm not starving to death or anything like that. I don't have any serious problem.
Dorothy takes good care of you, Your Excellency,
Yes.
in terms of
She thinks I'm starving to death, but I'm not.
Hello from France. What is your opinion of Father? Bonjour. What is your opinion of Father Gomar de Paul's warnings about Vatican II when it was still in session?
I remember Father de Paul. He worked on Long Island, and I was from Long Island. I was very young when it was 1964. I was 14 years old. So when he started, but yes, he was quite vocal. He was the theologian for Bishop Kurtz, I think it was a Franciscan bishop. And he was very vocal about what was wrong in Vatican II. I just don't remember details of what he said. That's a long time ago.
Indeed. I hadn't heard Bishop Sanborn's precise SSPX objections before this video. Now I understand. Thank you. Well, I think that's part of the advantage, Your Excellency, is big news events like this offer the opportunity for a lot of people to meet you who haven't met you before, or to hear what the proper positions that a Catholic should take in regards to Vatican II and the Catholic faith. Why would our Lord permit Vatican II? Is the Sedevacantists' conclusion that this is a form of chastisement, or is it a mystery?
Well, only God knows. We can only speculate. The general principle is that God does not permit an evil except to bring about a greater good. My speculation is that the church, in my opinion, was infected with liberalism, and that this is a way of shaking it out, the bad fruit from the tree falling to the ground. I think that the church will emerge from this as a much smaller situation, or a much smaller population, you might say, but with people who are truly fervent and who truly believe the Catholic faith. The good effect of this is that those who are resisting have become much better Catholics than they would have been before the council. That's the good effect of this. They are deepening their faith. They are learning their faith. They are more fervent in their prayers and their devotions. That's the good. And it also is shaking out of the tree the rot. It is people who believe in artificial birth control and abortion and all sorts of other things that deny transubstantiation. That's the rot. And so that's my opinion, is that God is purifying his church, just as he did to a great extent in the Old Testament.
Yeah, see, the last time we talked, I think it was the last day of class for the seminary. They were not last day of class, last day in the session, but they're all gone now, I think. Is that correct?
Not all. No, some stay for a month in the seminary in order to keep the seminary going. And some others go on vacation. Some have 2 months of work because they can't go home because it's too far away. But it's just an easier time. They generally on vacation, you do different things that you don't really go on vacation. You just do different things from what you do normally. So that's, the rule is relaxed. They can talk and do things that they couldn't ordinarily do most of the day.
Why is silence so important in the seminary, Your Excellency?
The seminary is quasi-monastic. It's something like a prolonged retreat. And silence is necessary to keep you undistracted from the world, see, and be recollected. So they have a general rule of silence, but they can talk at different times during the day. But they are alone in their own rooms. They can't talk to each other. It's not a big social time. There's recreation times when they talk, etc. And then they have extended recreations on Saturdays and Fridays.
And they take full advantage of that, Your Excellency.
It's not like a Trappist monastery. No, it isn't. It's they take advantage. Yes. No, it's the normal seminary rule, but there has to be a great deal of silence in order to be recollected.
Yes, during extended recreation, you will see mountain biking and board games, pickleball.
We won't talk about the mountain biking.
Tennis, golfing.
Mountain, and one seminarian who shall remain nameless broke his head essentially by going down the roughest of the bike paths.
Yeah, hopefully he's been chastised. He's been reminded of it often enough, Your Excellency, by pretty much everyone there.
Yes, so. that'll stay with him for the rest of his life.
So we're close to the end of the stream, but I think this person might have just joined, Your Excellency. Would someone explain, is he against Vatican II? You could say what you think about Vatican II in just a few sentences, Your Excellency.
Well, it was a meeting in which the hierarchy at the let's say the suggestion or pushing of certain modernist theologians created a new religion and revolted against Roman Catholicism. And the church has been in a horrid state ever since, because these people continue to press forth with this new religion in opposition to Roman Catholicism. And that's precisely what has happened. They have excommunicated Roman Catholicism in this gesture of excommunicating the SSPX, because SSPX does not accept Vatican II. To their credit, they held on that, to their credit.
And Mihai, you look like you have a Romanian name. Father Trauner goes to Romania to say Mass occasionally, maybe once a month.
I think that's Romania. Yeah, Romania.
Yeah, that's definitely a Romanian name, Your Excellency.
Yes,
so
yes.
If you would like to know more, you can just use the contact us form on mhtseminary.org, and we'll be happy to connect you with Father Trauner, where you can get traditional sacraments and the Mass. Tartan Catholic for £10. Thank you, Tartan. If epikeia can be invoked to reject the Pius XII liturgy, why can't it be invoked to have a conclave of trad bishops, given the election process is a human law and a pontiff is very important for the church?
Well, it's apples and oranges. Pius XII, first of all, is dead. He is not the legislator. The legislator is absent. All right, so epikeia can be invoked when the legislator is absent. And given what we know about the reforms of Bugnini under Pius XII, and he was responsible for all of those changes, that is Bugnini, the Freemason Bugnini, it makes all the sense in the world to go back before Bugnini got his hands on the liturgy. And that's what we do. See, so you have the case of the absence of the legislator, and you have a serious reason. Those are the two reasons, the two elements of the use of epikeia. Epikeia cannot be used to have a conclave, because you need the ability to vote. You need the right to vote. It'd be as if if somebody that is not a American citizen said, by epikeia, I have the right to vote for the president.
I was going to say that might be not a good example, Your Excellency, because those people do vote in our elections.
They do. But the fact that people object to that, I mean, it's obviously against the Constitution. You need a right to vote, and we don't have a right to vote. It is a totally different thing. It's not you can't. You don't have a reason. So that you have the absence of the legislator, but you don't have a reason, because reason requires that you have a right to vote, and you don't have a right to vote.
And saying that the pontiff is very important, the supreme pontiff is very important, quote unquote, for the church, doesn't mean that you can just have a council and have an election, right?
No, It'd be if I went out on the street into the neighborhood and said, elect me the president of the United States. And they all said, you're the president of the United States. That's how absurd that would be. Epikeia says I can run for president in my neighborhood, and now I'm president of the United States. That's how absurd that thing is.
That what you're saying is that idea of using epikeia. That's what's
Yes,
absurd.
it lacks reason. And so it must be in accordance with reason, as I said with regard to the Pius XII liturgy. That's in accordance with reason. In hindsight, we can see what happened. Therefore, it's in accordance with reason if we are trying to keep tradition, to go back to what is truly traditional and not the Bugnini reforms. All right. But there's no reason. I mean, that whoever is elected the Pope by this crazy conclave is just going to walk around in a white cassock for about 3 weeks and then abandon it in absurdity. Because nobody pay attention to him.
And after all that cost for the new pectoral cross and the new cassock,
tiara and all of that, no one will pay attention to him, and he'll just, like all of them have, they just will sink into oblivion and go back to being an ordinary priest. But no one will take him seriously after that. I mean, once you've done that, you have put your foot in it, and say that you have gotten yourself elected the Pope. You have put your foot in it forever. No one will ever take you seriously. You would have to go get some honest job someplace.
So our Institute of Christ the King attendee has come back, Your Excellency. You haven't convinced me yet, but one of my sons attends your school, so maybe in the future. If I were to attend an SSPX Mass, would that be valid?
Well, if it's said by a priest who is ordained by a valid bishop, but they use a lot of priests who are ordained by Novus Ordo bishops, and they would say an invalid Mass. So it depends on who's saying the Mass.
Which is unfortunate. Now, it depends, and that is not a new objection. This was something that was pointed out in the 1983 letter, if you don't know about that. Yes. I'll try to put a link in the description, but it was already identified as early as 1983 that the use of Novus Ordo clergy would be problematic for those who are seeking to preserve the Catholic faith.
Yes.
Jimmy Hungen for £10. Does His Excellency remember who pointed out the changes in the John the 23rd liturgy and breviary to him?
Bishop Dolan. Bishop Dolan was very, very astute with regard to liturgy. And when he was at Econ, he knew all about that stuff. And so he introduced me to the traditional breviary. Yeah, he was very good for that.
Well, I was going to say, I also remember the hardcore guerrilla resistance tactics of Bishop Dolan at Econ, hiding the new liturgical books when it came time for Holy Week. I don't know where they are.
Yes, he also hid the pulpits. They would say Mass, they would read the epistle from some sort of pulpit in Latin to the seminarians, and then the gospel. He hid those together with Father Bunter, from what I understand. And so they couldn't find them, so they had to say the Mass at the altar. You see, so he was responsible actually for SSPX going back to John the 23rd, because they were saying in 1964 or 65 Mass. They went back to John the 23rd.
Well, could you imagine the SSPX giving credit to Bishop Dolan for that, going back to, quote unquote, going back to 64?
I tend to doubt that we're going to hear that.
I appreciate Bishop Dolan hiding that. I remember when I was in the Novus Ordo and we got to the St. Blaise blessing, that Eucharistic ministers would take candles and go out and administer blessings. And I knew this was going to happen. And so I hid the candles in the sacristy from the extraordinary minister. And he said, where are the candles? And I said, I just raised my hands. And then he said, where are the candles? With the spirit of Vatican II. And, I didn't want to get into a fight in the sacristy. So I showed them that they were above the closet. He got them and went out to administer invalid blessings to people. Is there any room for the position that Rome has lost its authority, but the Pope's name should still be commemorated before his removal in a provisional sense?
No, no, he is a false Pope. He is a Pope-elect only. Just as a president-elect in this country is not a true president, but he's a president-elect. So he has no power. So no, a false pope should not be mentioned in the canon.
$50 from JGB. JGB, we're a little over time actually now, but if you have a question, please type it in quickly and I'll try to ask His Excellency. I've heard it said that Vatican II is equivalent to the kiss of Judas. I wonder what His Excellency thinks of that comparison.
Well, it's the betrayal of Christ, absolutely. And the kiss of Judas was sort of the symbol of the betrayal of Christ. I mean, that was his way of doing it. And yes, I would say that's a very good analogy.
Father Calderon seems to express that the SSPX resistance view is not a false pope, but a false magisterium. That is, the pope was not truly teaching. What do you think of that, Your Excellency?
I think it's absurd. Of course he's teaching. Vatican II. The SSPX has been excommunicated for not accepting Vatican II. Is that not magisterium? It's obligatory. Is that not magisterium? I think it's totally absurd. It's these little ways in which they try to avoid what is staring them in the face.
There's always got to be a T that wasn't crossed or an I wasn't dotted or it was done on Tuesday and the office is closed on Tuesday, so it can't be valid. All right. The last one, Jimmy 150 pounds. Thank you, Jimmy. Does His Excellency ever think that the mainstream Novus Ordo or EWTN summary of Vatican II is lacking in distinction and historical understanding? For example, you hear Vatican II gave Mass to the people in the vernacular rather than in Latin.
Well, it did a lot more than that. Read Father Cicada's book. It was not merely a question of translating. And, it was proposed as that. I remember back in the 60s, oh, we're going to have the Mass in English now. And, oh, that's nice. We can understand it. People would say that. It was much more sinister than that. And first of all, that would have been a big mistake to begin with. But it was far more sinister than anything like that. It was to make a Protestantized Mass. So it was, remember I said that everything about Vatican II was ecumenism. They made an ecumenical Mass, something that would be acceptable to Protestants. And so that is a betrayal of the Catholic Church, a betrayal of the sacred liturgy. So yeah, that's nonsense.
A little data point here, Your Excellency. I spoke to an SSPX priest for a few weeks concerning these issues, and I was surprised when he told me that sedevacantism was a completely justified position to hold, even though he was ordained in the Novus Ordo.
Yes, I've heard things like that. Yes,
I think an old seminary colleague from the old days, Your Excellency, has said that he agrees with everything that's said in your newsletters.
Yes.
One might say.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you're watching this later, you can still hit the like button after the live. You can do that during the replay. You can still make contributions. You can go to mhtseminary.org/donate, and you can donate there if you have questions that you want to ask for a future questions for the rector. Obviously, this was specifically about the SSPX excommunications, but His Excellency does a monthly questions for the rector on this channel, and he does a monthly Q&A on the Roman Catholic Media channel. So if you're unfamiliar with that work, you can feel free to subscribe. There's lots of sermons and conferences on that channel. And here are a lot of His Excellency being in the hot seat for 2 hours and answering a lot of questions on pretty much everything. Someone's sliding in a super chat here, Your Excellency, but I feel you've answered this already. Traditional Catholic Mama for $10. Are the SSPX bona fide schismatics now? How can we recommend them? They are a sect willingly excommunicated by the Pope they profess to recognize. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, that is true. They are schismatics. Pope says they are schismatics. If the Pope says they're schismatics, if he is the Pope, then you're a schismatic. There's no higher court. There is no getting around that. You see? So you can't recommend them. Obviously, they are a sect. If he's the Pope. Now, I would say he's not the Pope. So therefore, in that sense, they're not a sect. But they profess him to be the Pope, and therefore they fall into that category. If he's the Pope, then they're a sect.
That's a strange thing. You're actually, in a sense, we don't believe that a true excommunication happened because we don't believe that he's the Pope, but they believe that he is the Pope. So yes. It would be.
Yes.
All right. As always, Your Excellency, thank you so much for your time and sitting there and answering questions, as I say, for 2 hours nonstop. And we'll see you later this month for the regular questions for the rector.
Thank you.